listeners! Natalie and Henry here from the Vandal Factory podcast. Now, normally when we interview a guest, we have to edit the chat down, but we've got a bit tired of doing that because sometimes we're having to cut some excellent content and they say really amazing things. And we think you deserve to hear the full interview from the Vandal Factory podcast.
I chatted to Peyvand Sadeghian up at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe pretty much straight after she came off stage for her show Jewel, a solo performance using puppetry, drag and animation to tell the story of both being British and Iranian.
So if you want to hear a song that's chosen by Peyvand, check out the full podcast episode, number 17, titled The Seeds and the Tools.
Nice.
Yeah.
10 minutes time. Great. Hello, could you introduce yourself and tell us your vibe for our listeners, please?
So my name's Peyvand Sadeghian. I can't even say my own name, sorry, I'm a bit fried. Let me start that again. My name's Peyvand Sadeghian. Obviously that's my vibe because I'm just being a bit of a scatterbrain straight off stage. But yeah, as you can hear, I'm a Cockney. Well, what is my vibe? A bit all over the place. Into punk and oi and theatre, which is a weird mix. And I like cats, yeah.
What's your favourite type of cat?
Oh, do you know what? I really love a little street cat moggy that's just a bit bolshy and friendly. Or tells you to fuck off. Like,
You're not projecting at all into this cat, are you? Your own personality?
Absolutely not. That's just that's their own personalities they bring if you grow up on the streets.
So it's day 2 of your show here. Now, I've been, in my ignorance, calling it Jewel, but it's not called Jewel. It's got a longer title than that. So what's it like, day 2 of bringing the show up to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's dual Dogganair, but it's not something that I'm, like, holding against people, because unless you read Farsi, then you wouldn't necessarily know. Yeah, day 2 was definitely, I feel like I've arrived. Yesterday was just manic. So it's just nice to kind of get it out in front of an audience after literally months of putting in the work for it. So yeah, just remembering why I'm doing it and why I've been tired and lacking sleep for months as well.
Well, it's not just months, it's years, because you said the show it started in 2019. So can we go back, what was the catalyst to go, I want to tell this story?
Yeah, so I mean, it's one of those things I'd had in my mind for a little while, but I think the thing that really spurred me towards it was people sort of, around that time, a lot of people were sort of going on about their passports, a lot of British people being like, oh, you're so lucky, you've got a second passport. It's like, yeah, depends. I don't know if the Iranian passport was that useful. And then also, like, people that had EU passports having to suddenly sort their residency status out and all this everyone kind of being up in arms about it for one reason or another. And so that's, I think, what was like, you know what, let's talk about passports, but from my specific point of view. So yeah, it uses that to hopefully springboard into a wider point of relation, I think.
So the show's about, well, lots of things, but like things I took away are about duality, identity. You talk about being a stateless person, but also that relationship with people say, when are you going back to Iran when you were born in the UK?
Yeah.
So I suppose, like, over the last 4 years, how have you sort of started interrogating these themes?
Yeah, I think I was really keen to look at, because you get a lot of plays about identity or identity politics, and that's all valid, but this is literally the politics of identity, as in the papers that you've got and that you're entitled to, and the changes that can like literally the rug getting pulled from underneath you. And a lot of people don't realise, I didn't realise, that you're not, just because you're born in the UK, you're born a British citizen. And it wasn't until literally when I was going on holiday with my mates in my late teens that I was like, oh shit, wait, I'm not, what? Why have I got these papers saying that I'm not working when I'm like 1 year old? And like, what? I was already at primary school and this paper's saying that I'm still not a British citizen. Like, just stuff that like absolutely baffled me. So that's kind of what, like, the angle I'm sort of coming at it from. And then yeah, so I kind of naturalised and I got my British passport, and then I went to Iran, and then they're like, no, you're Iranian, and because their laws are by blood, so it's like if you've got a parent, a dad, some paternal line, then you are, as far as they are concerned, Iranian. So I've got those two passports. Can't get rid of the Iranian one, really. In theory you can. In practice, it's not actually doable. And then in the meanwhile, like in the past few years in the UK, you've got cases of the government sort of passing laws that mean that if you've got any ties to any other country that's not the UK, you can potentially have your British citizenship stripped. And that's, even with Shaheen Begum, not that she's the most likeable person on earth, but she actually wasn't even a Bangladeshi citizen or entitled to one, and yet there was the assumption of like, well, if we take the British passport off you, you can be their problem. And it's like, well, that's not really. There's a duty. If you are. It is a human right to have a passport and to have protection of citizenship. And so that's. I don't know if I've answered your question. It's all over the place, but yeah, it's going around those sort of circles.
I think the show has so many really strong, powerful moments that just hit the audience with those facts and that information, and really, as a British-born white person with all the privilege in the world, it's that reminder for me. I suppose, do you think about audience? Were you writing the show going, this is my story, I need to tell it, whoever's in the audience? Is it for people with that dual nationality? Is it for that reminder for people like me to be aware and keep fighting that fight against this hideous, bureaucratic, hostile environment, state bullshit that happens?
I think it's for anyone that is interested in those things from whatever angle. So, for any kind of politically or socially engaged person, there is part of me that hopes that there's kind of mixed Iranian diasporas that come and see it as well. But the team behind it, there's a few of us that are Iranian, there's a few of us that aren't, and everyone has their own kind of point of contact with the subject matter. So I think in making it, it was about making all these different points or offers for audiences at different intersections, I suppose, to relate to, which is why there's chunks of it that are in Farsi, and you're not expected to understand all of it all the time, and I think that's kind of where we've come from. So don't come and see it if you don't like hearing other languages. It's probably not for you.
Do you hear that, Priti Patel? I don't know, she probably. If I were to walk into your rehearsal room halfway through the process, halfway through the day, what would I see? What's going on in that room to create this place? Because it's a really mischievous show. I think it's playful, like you say. There's so much fusion of different language. There's bits of puppetry and a bit of dance, a bit of movement. There's lots of. It's almost like lots of fun sketches bottled together. Projection. I'm telling you what's in your show. You know this. This is for the listener. But what would I expect walking into that rehearsal room?
So sometimes there'd be some quite lively discussions about, because I'm writing it and in it, so I can never be outside of it. So the outside eyes, be it the directors or the other creatives, were really important. So there'd be times of oh, I'm getting this from that, and I'll be like, that is not what I'm going for. Let's go back to the drawing board on that. And because it's not linear in its narrative, so there's lots of changing of orders of things, lots of me coming up with ideas and going, can we just try it? Because there'd be a lot of raised eyebrows, being and then trying it, and either it'd work or it didn't. So a lot of experimenting. Also just a lot of me being very confused and literally not even know my own name sometimes, because it's one of those bewildering sort of things if you're in it. So yeah, kind of having people on the outside grounding me and being yeah, this is happening now. I'm oh yeah, I'm glad someone's on it. So yeah, really genuinely collaborative. Sometimes Al, the video designer, being mate, that's a 2-week job to make that video, so that's not gonna so those sort of negotiations, with the sound and stuff as well. So yeah, really sort of lots of back and forth, lots of conversations and collaborations and offers, really just trying stuff out.
I love the mischievousness with the audience. there's a playfulness at getting them to do things, to respond, to be part of it. Almost at times it felt stand-up, like, you know, at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, like there's got a little bit of that, like just teasing, asking them things. Like how much of that it comes from performing in live audience going, I want more of this, or was that always going to be there, that yes, I want to be able to play with my audience?
Yeah, that was really early on, actually. That was a strand that I knew absolutely would be there. And, you know, when I first did the show in 2020, that was a different iteration, and I started developing it in 2019. And the first things I did with it was actually just test the interactive elements out. And even though I didn't have the content for them, I was sort of testing concept, because it is really important for me to be like, look, we're all in a room together. There's no fourth wall. I'm not just telling you this story about when I was a kid and got stuck in Iran. It's about us literally being here right now, and you offering something and doing some of the work, because I ain't got all the answers, that's for sure. So, that was always really, really important, I think.
And one of the jobs you ask the audience to do is to come up with something that matters to them. And, you know, I was ready to put my hand up and say we should be for trans rights or smashing the patriarchy or workers' rights. But today it was potholes, and was the thing that we were angry about. I don't know, I think that was a very generous audience moment that just goes, yes, I'm going to give you this thing and let's move it on. I guess, can you speak to a little bit of that, why you want to encourage your audience to have a bit of a chant, to almost practice what a revolution could look like?
Yeah, I mean, I did a show in 2020 and it's really varied. Sometimes it depends how polite the audience is, and I think if you get a couple of like really rowdy people, they'll just throw things in there. Like there was shows before that we had like, femicide, and you know, lots of things like that. And then there was one that we had good coffee, and I'm like, fine. Does everyone like good coffee? Yeah, that would be our
Okay. And pro good coffee. It was like down with good coffee.
Yeah. So it's a cash crop, but we'll fight for good coffee. And I think even with those suggestions, that's why I'm like, look, we're in a theatre. It's not, and if you're, I think people know in the audience that even if they're chanting that's not actually something they give a shit about. And I think even having that realisation and that uncomfortableness is worth having in that moment, because then you think, well, actually, maybe I should have just shouted something, or, So I think that's why I do that, and and I think that's why it varies in the audiences. Of sometimes if people are more rehearsed at that kind of thing, they're really going for it and it feels like a demo sometimes that you're at, and then other times if they're not, that's also fine, because it's just what it is. It's just an experiment every time, I think.
I should have brought my megaphone. I could just whipped it out and joined in. That felt be the most like punky part of it, and I'd like to ask you about that. Is as a theatre maker and a lover of punk, is punk an ingredient, a tool, a theme? Like, how do you think that punk alchemy works within the work that you do?
Yeah, I think it kind of filters through a lot in the aesthetic. I think there's a sort of rough and readiness to it, and there's definitely a lot of the soundtrack, like in the making of it, was definitely present in my kind of personal playlist to write to, and because it is part of me, it's sort of present in that way, I suppose. And yeah, that sort of like rantingness ish of it. If I had my way, there'd be more. But also I don't play any instruments, so it's not quite gig theatre. But sorry, I've forgotten what the thread of the thing is. But I think it's that kind of like iconoclasticness of it, that irreverence of taking the piss out of things that may be considered sacred as well. The BBC line always gets a bit of a in there, and I'm like, I always find that really funny, that people think like, that's crossing that's a bit of touch and go in it. And I'm like, really? Because I think there's other things in it that are a bit more kind of oof about it. But yeah, so I think that kind of that approach is what in terms of like the punkness filters through. That sort of nothing is sacred, especially if they're the ones that are in power.
There's there's stuff in there that you say, please don't tweet about this, talk about this, and we won't go into specifics. But as much as iconoclastic and you are attacking the powers that be, there's quite a dangerous show, right? Like, you don't want to get targeted for some of the things that you're saying. Is that conversations you've had with your team, yourself?
Yeah, so that's where it becomes a responsibility of a collaborative effort, because when I first started making it, I was like, I don't give a shit. I don't care. Also, because I have 2 different names, because my Iranian citizenship is in a totally different name. But because I am collaborating with other Iranians, it was like, oh, okay, no, actually. It's about their care as well, and also family members and that are present still in Iran. And so it's just making sure that none of that is out in the ether for anyone, especially now, for people to get hold of, to use, not even against me, but to use against people in Iran that are associated with. And so that's where that kind of come from. So otherwise I'd be like, I don't care. Yeah.
And just last couple of questions then. One is a chance to plug some of the stuff you talk about in the show. You mentioned that male steelworkers go on strike because they're for women's rights, and there's a hashtag going around. Can you talk a little bit about that and why that's important to, why is that important to platform? We know it's important to platform, but in your words, why is that like in the DNA of the show?
So I think with the current woman life freedom movement in Iran, what I think is really interesting, and what I think a lot of people can learn from it, is how there's no whataboutissery. And so I use the Steelworkers Union as an example, because they go on strike and they make the demands on behalf of woman life freedom, because they understand that if the women are oppressed, we are too. And there's no like, what about us? There's people that have been unfortunately executed, arrested, that are men that are chanting woman life freedom, and meanwhile, Black Lives Matter, well, what about us? And it's just like, oh, come on. And I just think that's why it's important to me. It's a really good lesson. And what we're trying to do whilst we're up here as well is to get people to join in on that solidarity. And so if you look up the show page, there'll be sort of more clear instructions on this, but the condensed version is we're collecting videos of people saying woman life freedom in whatever language they have, and that will make a literal digital wall of solidarity for the Pleasance at Edinburgh Fringe. And there's plans I can't quite officially announce because it hasn't been signed off yet, but the plan is to eventually have a big video of all those kind of things compiled together, so it's just like women life freedom cut in between lots of people, that goes out in time for Massa Amini's 1 year anniversary, and also the anniversary of the women life freedom movement, which is on the 16th of September. So that's our aim. Oh, there's a rumbling going on.
Is it the revolution? Has it started?
I think it's coming.
Well, in that case, we better get some tunes on the go so we can have a little sing song to the revolution. So if you could introduce any song, what would it be for our listeners?
So I was going to this has been one of them where I'm like, there's loads of like British punk that obviously I would love and still do. But in this case, I think I'm going to go for some Iranian hip hop, which is actually the most punk genre there. I think it's really political, really like just gets ya.